The signal came at 0347 hours, cutting through the quiet hum of the deep space monitoring station like a knife through silence. Lieutenant Commander Jake Murphy had been drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarm started screaming across the Sol Defense Network's main console. He set down his mug and moved quickly to the communication array. The signal was weak, distorted by the vast distances of space, but it was definitely alien. Murphy had been monitoring space frequencies for 6 years, ever since humanity had figured out how to listen to the galaxy's conversations. Most alien chatter was boring trade negotiations or weather reports. This was different. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything he had heard before. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with breaking glass, beautiful but desperate. The universal translator worked slowly, converting the alien words into something humans could understand. Please, anyone who can hear this, we are the last. Our warriors have fallen. Our defenses crumble. If there is mercy in the galaxy, send help before we are consumed entirely. Murphy felt his stomach drop. He had heard distress calls before, but never one like this. The alien voice was fading, getting weaker with each word. In the background, he could hear explosions and what sounded like screaming. This is Elder Shimmerlight of the Zephyrian people, the voice continued. Our world burns. The Devourers have come to Kepler 442. They eat our planet, drain our core, consume our children. We cannot stop them. Someone, anyone, please. The signal died. Murphy stared at the console for a long moment, then hit the record button to play it back. The desperation in the alien's voice was real. These Zephyrians, whoever they were dying. And they were asking for help. He grabbed his secure phone and dialed Admiral Ben Carter's personal number. Carter answered on the second ring, sounding tired but alert. What is it, Murphy? Sir, we just received a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system. Alien species called the Zephyrians. They're under attack by something called the Devourers. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Carter's voice, sharp and focused. Send me everything you have. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Murphy spent the next hour pulling up everything the human databases had on the Kepler 442 system and the species mentioned in the signal. The Zephyrians were listed as a peaceful, crystalline race that had never bothered anyone. They were known for their beautiful art and philosophy, not for fighting wars. The Devourers were different. The galaxy's databases had very little information about them, but what was there made Murphy's skin crawl. They were described as parasitic entities that consumed entire civilizations. Whole star systems had gone dark after Devourer attacks. The few survivors who had escaped their assault spoke of biomechanical ships that literally ate planets. When Admiral Carter arrived, he looked like he had not slept in days. Carter was a career military man, 60 years old with gray hair and scars from the resource wars that had nearly destroyed Earth decades ago. He had seen the worst that humans could do to each other. But as he read Murphy's report, his face grew darker. Have any of the major galactic powers responded? Carter asked. Murphy pulled up the communication logs. The signal went out on all frequencies, sir. The Altarian Federation, the Hegemony of Worlds, and the Cosmic Alliance all received it. And the Altarians sent a message to their fleet commanders. Quote, do not engage with Devourer forces under any circumstances. Previous encounters have resulted in total fleet loss. The Hegemony classified the Zephyrian system as non-strategic and marked it for observation only. The Cosmic Alliance is still debating what to do. Carter's jaw tightened. So they're going to let them die. Looks that way, sir. The Admiral walked to the large viewing window that looked out at Earth's orbital defense platforms. Beyond them, the stars waited. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was being destroyed while the galaxy's great powers held committee meetings. Get me Captain Lisa Brooks, Carter said finally. Tell her to prep the Guardian for immediate launch. Murphy blinked. Sir, the Guardian is our most advanced ship. If we send her out there, we might save some lives. Carter cut him off. Those alien bastards up there think we're too young, too violent, too reckless to be part of their fancy galactic community. Maybe they're right. but at least we answer when someone's dying. Captain Lisa Brooks arrived at the command center 30 minutes later. She was 35 years old, one of the youngest ship commanders in Earth's fleet, with short black hair and the kind of steady eyes that came from years of making life-or-death decisions in space. She had grown up in the outer colonies where help was always light years away and you learned to handle problems yourself. "Admiral," she said, saluting sharply. Carter handed her the mission file. "Captain, I'm ordering you to take the Guardian to the Kepler 4482 system. There's an alien species under attack by hostiles. They've asked for help." Brooks read through the file quickly, her expression never changing. When she finished, she looked up at Carter. "Sir, according to this data, the Devourers have destroyed entire fleets. We're talking about one ship against an unknown number of enemies." "That's correct. And the major galactic powers have all refused to help?" "Also correct." Brooks was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she nodded. "When do we launch, sir?" Carter smiled for the first time in hours. "As soon as you can get your crew ready, Captain." "And Brooks?" "Yes, sir." "Bring them home." As Brooks left to prepare her ship, Murphy watched the communication logs update in real time. More alien civilizations were receiving the Zephyrian distress signal. The Vegan Trade Union marked it as noted but non-actionable. The Tau Ceti Assembly sent thoughts and prayers but no ships. The Centauri Federation filed the signal under Galactic Incidents, observation only. One by one, the galaxy's great civilizations heard the cry for help and turned away. But on Earth, 300 volunteers were climbing aboard humanity's most advanced warship, checking weapons, plotting jump coordinates, and preparing to do what no one else would do: answer the call. The UES Guardian was humanity's pride and joy, built in the orbital shipyards above Mars over 5 years. She was 800 meters long, armed with kinetic cannons and fusion missiles, powered by the most advanced reactor Earth could build. Captain Lisa Brooks walked through her corridors 2 hours before launch, watching her crew make final preparations. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Amy Davis worked with her team to squeeze every bit of power from the fusion drives. Davis was a small woman with grease-stained hands and the ability to make broken machines work through pure stubbornness. She had grown up fixing mining equipment on asteroid stations where failure meant death. "How long to reach Kepler 442? Brooks asked. 3 weeks at maximum burn, Davis replied, not looking up from her console. "I can give you more speed, but we'll arrive with empty fuel tanks." 3 weeks it is. Those aliens might not have 3 weeks. Davis finally looked up. "Captain, I've been reading about these Devourers. They use biomechanical technology. Our weapons might not work the same way against living ships." Brooks nodded. "What do you suggest?" "Give me 2 days during the trip. I can modify our kinetic rounds, make them more effective against biological targets. Also want to rig some of our mining charges as bombs. If we need to board their ships, do it." In the weapons bay, Tactical Officer Ryan Stone ran combat drills with the ship's Marine contingent. Stone was a veteran of the Martian independence. War, a tall man with steady hands and ice-cold nerves. He had learned to fight in the tunnels under Mars, where every battle was close and personal. Colonel Pete Johnson led the Marines through boarding scenarios. Johnson was built like a tank, with scars on his arms from fighting pirates in the asteroid belt. His Marines were volunteers from Earth's roughest neighborhoods and toughest colonies. They knew how to fight dirty. "Listen up," Johnson told his troops. "We don't know what these Devourer ships look like inside. Could be narrow tunnels, could be wide spaces, could be full of atmosphere, could be vacuum. We train for everything." The Marines nodded and went back to their practice. They used real weapons with safety rounds, fighting in mock ship corridors that could be reconfigured into different layouts. These were soldiers who had grown up on a world where everything tried to kill them, from the weather to the wildlife to other humans. Dr. Kate Allen worked in the medical bay, studying every piece of information about Devourer biology. Allen had served as a field medic in 3 different wars before joining the Space Service. She was used to treating impossible wounds under impossible conditions. The alien records were fragments, pieces of data collected from the few survivors of devourer attacks. The creatures seemed to be silicon-based rather than carbon-based like most life. They fed on planetary cores, literally eating the molten metal and rock that kept worlds alive. They're parasites, she told Brooks during a briefing. But smart parasites. They don't just destroy randomly. They're systematic. They drain a planet's core over months, keeping the civilization alive as long as possible to harvest their technology. How do we kill them? Alan pulled up a biological scan on her screen. Their ships are partially alive. Living metal, biological computers, organic weapons. If we can disrupt their nervous systems— You mean poison them? Something like that. I'm working on it. Communications officer Emma Cole spent her time trying to contact other ships, other civilizations, anyone who might help. Cole was young, barely 25, but she had grown up on the frontier colonies where talking to distant outposts was a survival skill. The responses she received were not encouraging. The Altarian Federation sent a formal message. Primitive. Species are advised to avoid engagement with Class X threats. Altarian Command assumes no responsibility for vessels ignoring this warning. The hegemony of worlds did not respond at all. The Cosmic Alliance sent a single message from Ambassador Veltar. Your species intrigues us, humans. We will watch your fate with interest. We hope you prove as remarkable as you believe yourselves to be. At least someone's paying attention, Cole muttered, filing the message. As the Guardian traveled through hyperspace, the crew settled into a routine. They drilled constantly. The Marines practiced boarding actions. The gunners ran target practice against simulated alien ships. The engineers tested and retested every system. Brooks held briefings every day, going over what they knew about the enemy and what they were walking into. The numbers were not good. Intelligence suggested the Devourers had dozens of ships in the Kepler system. The Guardian was one ship with 200 crew members. Why are we doing this? Asked Ensign Chris Park during one briefing. Park was fresh, out of the academy, 22 years old and on his first deep space mission. Brooks looked at him for a long moment. Because they asked for help, son. And when someone's dying, you don't leave them to die alone. But the odds. The odds don't matter, interrupted Chief Petty Officer Helen Ross. Ross was a 40-year veteran who had served on everything from patrol boats to battleships. We're humans. We don't run from fights just because they're hard, the crew murmured. Agreement. These were people who had grown up on a world that had nearly killed itself with wars, pollution, and climate disasters. They had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, plagues, and famines. Their ancestors had crawled out of caves and built spaceships. They were not the type to back down from a challenge. On the 15th day of the journey, long-range sensors detected the first signs of the Kepler system. What they found made the crew go quiet. 3 planets showed no life signs. The sensor readings were strange, showing planetary cores that had been partially drained. The worlds were still there, but they were dying, cooling from the inside out. 2. Massive objects orbited the 4th planet. Too big to be natural moons, but clearly artificial. As the Guardian got closer, the sensors resolved the shapes into something that made Brooks feel sick. The objects were ships, but they looked like metallic parasites. They were attached to the planet's surface by massive tendrils that burrowed deep into the crust. The ships were feeding, literally eating the world beneath them. Dear God, whispered Dr. Allen, staring at the sensor display. Around the dying planet, smaller ships patrolled like antibodies in a bloodstream. The Devourer fleet was larger than intelligence had suggested. Brooks counted at least 40 capital ships and hundreds of smaller vessels. And somewhere in that nightmare, the last of the Zephyrians were fighting for their lives. Brooks turned to her crew. They were looking at her, waiting for orders. She could see fear in some faces, determination in others. They all knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. All right, people, she said quietly. We came here to help someone. Let's see what these Deathworlders can do. The Guardian dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what they saw made the entire bridge crew fall silent. The 4th planet, Crystalla, was being consumed alive. Massive biomechanical ships clung to its surface, like ticks on a dying animal, their metallic tendrils boring deep into the planet's crust. The world's once blue oceans had turned gray, and its crystal cities flickered like dying stars. Captain Brooks gripped her command chair as the sensors updated. 47 Devourer capital ships, each one larger than anything in Earth's fleet. Thousands of smaller hunter vessels swarmed between them like angry wasps. And somewhere in that chaos, the last Zephyrian ships were fighting a hopeless battle. "Communications, try to reach the Zephyrians," Brooks ordered. Emma Cole worked frantically at her console. After several minutes, she managed to connect with a weak signal. The voice that came through was the same one they had heard in the original. Distress call, but weaker now, filled with exhaustion. "This is Elder Shimmerlight of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. Who dares enter this graveyard?" "Elder Shimmerlight, this is Captain Lisa Brooks of the Earth Vessel Guardian. We received your distress call. We're here to help." There was a long pause. When Shimmerlight spoke again, his voice carried disbelief. "Earth? The small world that the great powers ignore, you came?" "Yes, sir. We came. But you are so few. One small ship against the swarm. Why do you come to die with us?" Brooks looked around her bridge at her crew. Ryan Stone was already calculating firing solutions. Amy Davis was pushing the engines to maximum power. Dr. Allen was preparing the medical bay for casualties. These were her people, and they had traveled 3 weeks to answer a call for help. "Because that's what humans do," Brooks said simply. On the tactical display, Ryan Stone highlighted the Devourer formation. "Captain, they're spread out across the entire system. The main feeding ships are attached to the planet's surface. They can't move while they're draining the core." "That's our advantage," Brooks realized. "Chief Davis, can we hurt those big ships while they're feeding?" "Their connection points to the planet look vulnerable," Davis replied from engineering. "If we can hit them there, we might be able to disrupt their feeding process." Brooks nodded. "Colonel Johnson, prepare boarding teams. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it." The Guardian accelerated toward the planet, using its smaller size and speed to avoid the larger Devourer ships. The alien vessels were designed for overwhelming firepower, not for chasing fast, maneuverable targets. Brooks used this against them, darting between the massive bioships like a fighter weaving through bombers. The first real test came when 3 Devourer hunter ships detected them and moved to intercept. Each hunter was twice the size of the Guardian, covered in organic armor that pulsed with alien life. They fired weapons that looked like living projectiles, bioplasma that ate through normal armor. "Evasive maneuvers," Brooks ordered. "Ryan, target their weapon ports." Stone opened fire with the Guardian's kinetic cannons. The tungsten rounds, modified by Chief Davis during their journey, punched through the aliens' organic armor like bullets through flesh. The first hunter ship shuddered and began bleeding a green fluid into space. But the other 2 hunters adapted quickly. Their bio-armor began to thicken where the human weapons hit. They were learning, evolving their defenses in real time. "They're getting tougher," Stone reported. "My shots aren't penetrating as deep." "Then we get closer," Brooks decided. "Colonel Johnson, take your team to the boarding tubes. We're going inside." The Guardian rammed straight into the side of the nearest hunter ship. The alien vessel's organic hull tried to seal around the human ship, but Chief Davis had prepared for this. She fired explosive charges that blew open a boarding hole, and Colonel Johnson led his Marines into the alien ship. The inside of the Devourer vessel was like fighting inside a living nightmare. The walls pulsed with veins of green fluid. The corridors were narrow and twisted, designed for creatures that moved differently than humans. But Johnson's Marines had trained for this. They moved through the ship like a virus, destroying everything they found. "It's all biological," Johnson reported over the radio. "No metal, no electronics, everything's alive." "Find the brain," Dr. Allen advised from the medical bay. "Cut off the head and the body dies." The Marines fought their way deeper into the ship, using explosives and flamethrowers against the organic defenders. The Devourers inside were spider-like creatures with metallic shells, fast and deadly, but not prepared for humans who fought like their lives depended on it. Johnson found what looked like a command center, a chamber filled with pulsing brain tissue connected by nerve fibers. He planted explosives throughout the room and led his team back to the Guardian. The hunter ship died when the charges went off. Its bio-armor stopped pulsing, its weapons went silent, and it began to drift like a dead whale, but the victory cost them. The Guardian had taken heavy damage from the ramming attack. 3 Marines were dead, including young Chris Park, who had asked why they were fighting impossible odds. 8 more were wounded. "We can't keep doing this," Chief Davis reported. "The ship won't survive another ramming attack." Brooks studied the tactical display. The main Devourer ships were still feeding on the planet, but now they were aware of the human threat. Smaller vessels were converging on their position. "Then we change tactics," she decided. "Ryan, target the connection points between the feeders and the planet. If we can't board them, we'll cut them loose." The Guardian began a dangerous dance around the planet's surface, staying low enough to avoid the main weapons of the feeding ships, but high enough to target their vulnerable connection points. Stone fired continuously, his modified kinetic rounds severing the biomechanical tendrils that connected the Devourer ships to Kristalla's core. One by one, the massive ships began to disconnect from the planet. Without their feeding tubes, they were free to move but also cut off from their energy source. Some tried to reattach to the planet. Others turned their attention to the Guardian. The surviving Zephyrian ships, seeing the humans' desperate attack, began their own assault. Their crystalline vessels were beautiful but fragile, designed for art and exploration rather than war, but they fought with the fury of a people who had nothing left to lose. Elder Shimmerlight's ship, a delicate creation that looked like flying jewelry, moved alongside the Guardian. "Humans," his voice came over the radio, "you fight like the old stories say the first builders fought, with courage that defies wisdom." "Sometimes wisdom is overrated," Brooks replied, watching as another Devourer ship turned toward them. The biomechanical monster was 3 times the Guardian's size, its hull rippling with weapons that looked like metallic tumors. The next phase of the battle was about to begin, and Brooks knew they were running out of options. But they had accomplished something important. They had shown the Devourers that their feeding could be disrupted. They had given the Zephyrians hope, and they had proven that sometimes, when the galaxy stays silent, Deathworlders are the ones who answer. The Guardian limped through space, her hull cracked in 3 places and her engines running on backup power. Captain Brooks stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display with grim determination. They had managed to disconnect 4 of the massive feeder ships from the planet's surface, but 30 more remained. And now the entire Devourer fleet was hunting them. Dr. Kate Allen burst onto the bridge, her medical coat stained with blood from treating the wounded. "Captain, I found something," she said, breathless from running through the ship's corridors. "What is it, Doc?" Allen pulled up her analysis on the main screen. "I've been studying the biomatter we collected from the hunter ship Colonel Johnson destroyed. These creatures aren't just working together. They're connected. All of them. It's like a hive mind." Brooks frowned. "You mean they share thoughts?" "More than that. They share everything. Memories, knowledge, tactical information. When one ship learns how to defend against our weapons, they all learn. That's why our attacks are getting less effective." Ryan Stone looked up from his weapons console. "That explains why they adapted so fast to our kinetic rounds. They're sharing defense strategies in real time." Allen nodded. "But here's the important part. I think I found how they communicate. Quantum entanglement. Their brain tissue uses quantum particles to send information instantly across any distance." Chief Engineer Amy Davis joined the conversation from her station. "Doc, are you saying we could disrupt their communication somehow?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. If we could create a quantum disruption field, we could cut their hive mind connection. Without that link, each ship would have to think for itself." Brooks felt a spark of hope. "How do we build this disruption field?" Davis was already running calculations. "We could modify our communications array, turn it into a quantum disruptor." "But..." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "But what?" "We'd have to get close to their primary ship, the biggest one, the one that's controlling all the others. and the disruption field would only work at point-blank range. Brooks understood immediately. You're talking about a suicide mission? Yes, ma'am. We'd have to ram the primary ship and activate the disruptor from inside their hull. The explosion would destroy us along with them. The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. The Guardian and her crew would die, but they might break the Devourer fleet and save the Zephyrians. Brooks looked around at her people. Emma Cole was young, barely out of the academy. Ryan Stone had a wife and 2 children back on Mars. Dr. Allen had spent her whole life saving people. Chief Davis had 3 grandchildren she had never met because she was always serving on distant ships. Captain, came a voice from the Marine quarters. Colonel Johnson appeared on the internal communications screen, his face bruised from the boarding action. I heard the discussion. My Marines volunteer for the mission. Pete, you don't understand. This isn't a boarding action. This is a one-way trip. Johnson's expression didn't change. Ma'am, my boys knew what they signed up for when they joined. This crew. We came here to save people. If dying is what it takes, then that's what we do. More voices joined the conversation. Chief Petty Officer Helen Ross spoke up from the engine room. Captain, engineering volunteers too. We've got work to finish. Emma Cole turned from her communication station. Communications volunteers, Captain. One by one, every department on the ship volunteered for the suicide mission. Brooks felt her throat tighten. These were her people, and they were willing to die because it was the right thing to do. All right, she said finally. All hands, prepare for final assault. We're going to hit the primary ship and activate the quantum disruptor. This will be a one-way mission. As the crew prepared for their final battle, Elder Shimmerlight's voice came over the radio. Human Captain Brooks, our sensors show you moving toward the primary Devourer vessel. This is madness. You cannot survive such an attack. We're not planning to survive, Elder. We're planning to win. There was a long pause. When Shimmerlight spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been tears. Your species, you fight like legends, like the heroes from our oldest stories. We will remember this. The Guardian began her final approach toward the largest Devourer ship. The biomechanical monster was the size of a small moon, covered in weapon ports that looked like infected wounds. It commanded the center of the fleet, its quantum signals coordinating the entire swarm. Around them, Devourer ships converged from all directions. The aliens had realized what the humans were attempting and were trying to stop them. Bioplasma, weapons fired from dozens of vessels, lighting up space like a deadly fireworks display. Chief Davis pushed the engines beyond their safety limits. Hull temperature critical, she reported. We've got maybe 5 minutes before the reactor overloads. That's all we need, Brooks replied. The Guardian took hit after hit as she raced toward the primary ship. Her shields failed first, then her armor began to peel away in molten strips. The bridge shook with each impact, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. Ryan Stone kept firing, his weapons targeting the biomechanical defenders that tried to intercept them. Ammunition at 20%, he called out. Save it for the primary ship, Brooks ordered. They were almost there. The massive Devourer vessel filled their entire view screen, its organic hull pulsing with alien life. Weapon ports opened like hungry mouths preparing to destroy the approaching human ship. Colonel Johnson and his Marines were already in the boarding tubes, ready to fight their way into the enemy ship if they survived the impact. Dr. Allen and Chief Davis were in the communications array, making final adjustments to the quantum disruptor. All stations, this is the captain, Brooks announced over the ship's intercom. It's been an honor serving with you. Remember, we didn't come out here to die. We came out here to save people. Today we do both. The Guardian slammed into the primary Devourer ship at full speed. The impact tore through both vessels, creating a massive hole in the alien ship's biomechanical hull. Emergency lights flashed as atmosphere vented into space. Brooks pulled herself up from the deck where the impact had thrown her. Half her bridge crew was unconscious or dead. The main screen was cracked but still functional, showing they had penetrated deep into the enemy ship. Davis, Allen, status on the disruptor. Dr. Allen's voice came through the damaged communication system, weak but determined. We're in position, Captain, ready to activate on your command. Brooks looked around, at what remained of her crew. Emma Cole was bleeding from a head wound but still working her console. Ryan Stone was unconscious, slumped over his weapons station. Through the bridge windows, she could see the organic walls of the Devourer ship trying to heal around them, attempting to trap them inside. This was it. The moment that would determine whether their sacrifice meant anything. "All hands," Brooks said quietly into her communicator. "It's been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. Dr. Allen, Chief Davis, activate the disruptor." The quantum disruption field erupted outward from the Guardian's modified communications array, invisible but devastating. It raced through the primary Devourer ship at the speed of light, severing quantum connections and destroying the neural pathways that linked the hive mind together. Across the Kepler system, 46 Devourer ships suddenly found themselves alone, cut off from the collective intelligence that had guided them for centuries. Without their shared knowledge and coordination, they began to falter, confused and vulnerable for the first time in their existence. The Guardian and her crew had paid the ultimate price, but they had given the galaxy something precious: hope and a chance for the innocent to survive. The quantum disruption field spread through space like ripples on a pond, invisible but deadly to the Devourer hive mind. Across the Kepler system, 46 massive bioships suddenly stopped moving in perfect coordination. For the first time, in centuries, each ship was alone with its own thoughts. Elder Shimmerlight watched from his crystalline command ship as the alien fleet began to falter. Ships that had moved like dancers now drifted without purpose. Some fired at empty space, others turned their weapons on each other, confused and frightened without their shared consciousness. "Now," Shimmerlight whispered into his communications device, "all Zephyrian ships attack now while they are blind and confused. The remaining Zephyrian vessels, beautiful crystal ships that looked like flying art, launched their final desperate assault. They had lost most of their fleet over the past months, but the survivors fought with the fury of a people who had nothing left to lose. Their weapons, designed for mining and construction, tore into the confused Devourer ships. Without their hive mind coordination, the biomechanical vessels could not adapt fast enough. Ships that had seemed invincible hours before now died under concentrated fire from the much smaller Zephyrian fleet. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was broken. Some ships fled into deep space, running blindly, without coordination. Others were destroyed by the Zephyrians. A few simply shut down, their biological systems failing without the hive mind to guide them. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The UES Guardian was gone, destroyed in the explosion that had saved them all. Of her crew of 200, only 37 survived. Zephyrian rescue ships found them floating in escape pods near the wreckage of both the Guardian and the primary Devourer vessel. Captain Lisa Brooks was alive but badly hurt, her left arm broken and her face cut by flying metal. Colonel Pete Johnson had burns across his back from the explosion. Dr. Kate Allen had a concussion, but was already trying to treat the other survivors. The Zephyrians brought the human survivors to their homeworld, Crystalla. The planet was damaged, but alive, its crystal cities flickering back to full brightness as the core began to heal from the Devourer feeding. The crystalline people treated the humans like heroes, giving them the best medical care and honoring their fallen comrades. Brooks stood in the Zephyrian Hall of Memory, looking at a new crystal sculpture that honored the Guardian's crew. The art piece showed the human ship ramming into the Devourer vessel, captured forever in beautiful blue crystal. Below it, carved in both human and Zephyrian script, were the names of everyone who had died. "Your people gave us our future, Elder," Shimmerlight said, approaching Brooks. The old Zephyrian leader looked tired but hopeful for the first time in months. "We will remember this gift forever." "They did what humans do," Brooks replied quietly. "They answered when someone called for help. And now the galaxy knows what Deathworlders can accomplish." Brooks turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Shimmerlight activated a holographic display that showed communication traffic from across the galaxy. "The news of your battle has spread to every civilized world. The major powers are concerned. The display showed messages from the Altarian Federation, the Hegemony of Worlds, and the Cosmic Alliance. All of them were suddenly very interested in establishing diplomatic relations with Earth. The same governments that had ignored the Zephyrian distress call were now sending offers of trade agreements and military partnerships. They're afraid of us, Brooks realized. Yes. But more importantly, the smaller civilizations are hopeful because of you. Another section of the display lit up, showing messages from dozens of minor species that had been ignored by the galactic powers. The Tau Mining Collective wanted to hire human security forces. The Vegan Agricultural Union was offering crop-sharing agreements. The Centauri Research Station wanted to exchange scientific knowledge. These people were like us, Shimmerlight explained. Too small, too weak, too unimportant for the great powers to care about. But now they know that someone will answer their calls for help. Someone will fight for them when they cannot fight for themselves. Brooks felt a mix of pride and sadness. Her ship was gone. Most of her crew was dead, but something important had changed in the galaxy. The silence had been broken. 3 weeks later, a new fleet arrived in the Kepler system. 5 human ships, led by Admiral Ben Carter himself aboard the UES Defiance. The Admiral met with the Guardian survivors and the Zephyrian leadership to discuss the future. Earth has decided to establish a permanent presence in this region, Carter announced during a joint meeting. We're setting up a rescue and defense station here in the Kepler system. Any civilization that calls for help will receive an answer. Elder Shimmerlight bowed in the Zephyrian style. Our system will be honored to host such a station, Carter turned to Captain Brooks, who was still recovering from her injuries. Captain, I'm offering you command of the new station. The Kepler defense platform will need someone who understands what it means to answer the call. Brooks looked around, the room at her surviving crew members. Emma Cole, now promoted to lieutenant commander. Ryan Stone, who had recovered from his injuries and was already designing new weapon systems. Dr. Allen, who was working with Zephyrian healers to develop new medical techniques. These were her people, and they had work to finish. I accept the command, Brooks said. But I have conditions. Name them. The station will respond to any distress call, regardless of the species or their political importance. No politics, no debates, no committee meetings. When someone calls for help, we answer. Carter smiled. Agreed. What else? The station will be open to any species that wants to serve alongside humans. We're not here to rule anyone, we're here to help. Also agreed. As the meeting ended and plans began for the new defense station, Brooks walked outside to look at the stars. Somewhere out there, civilizations were learning that the galaxy had changed. The great powers could no longer ignore the suffering of smaller species, because someone was watching. Someone was ready to act. Commander Jake Murphy, who had traveled with Admiral Carter's fleet, joined her on the observation deck. Captain, we're receiving dozens of messages from across the galaxy. Distress calls, requests for aid, invitations to establish diplomatic relations. Brooks nodded. How many ships do we have available for rescue operations? 7, with more coming from Earth every month. Then we better get to work. The galaxy stayed silent for too long. Time to make some noise. In the months that followed, human ships began appearing in distant star systems, answering calls that had been ignored for years. They rescued miners trapped on asteroid stations. They delivered medical supplies to plague-stricken worlds. They stood between pirates and defenseless colonies. The galaxy's great powers watched nervously as humanity built a network of smaller civilizations who knew they could count on the Deathworlders when trouble came. The balance of power was shifting, not through conquest or politics, but through the simple act of answering when someone called for help. On Earth, in the memorial hall that honored the Guardian's fallen crew, Admiral Carter stood before a wall of names. Jake Murphy, now a full commander, joined him. The galaxy's taking notice, Murphy observed, reading reports from human ships across known space. Carter nodded, watching through the windows as construction began on humanity's newest fleet. Ships designed not for conquest, but for protection. Not for glory, but for service. Good, he said quietly. Let them watch. Next time someone calls for help, they'll know Deathworlders don't stay silent. Above them, the stars waited, full of voices calling across the dark. And for the first time, in galactic history, those voices knew they would not call in vain.